With Crossout Designator being released in this year's Megatons, the differences between the OCG and the TCG are at the forefront of everyone's minds. After all, it was one of the cards that made the OCG different to the TCG, along with Maxi, which incidentally, people actually thought might come back on this ban list. That was a close one. In fact, Crossout Designator's release even spawned some talk about how the OCG and TCG should sync up, both in ban lists and in releases. Realistically, of course, we're a long way from that happening. Our ban lists are very different, and our product lineup doesn't correspond to the OCG at all. Because of this, there were cards that Konami decided to skip out on when it came to importing them to the TCG, some of which have been waiting for nearly a decade for TCG Senpai to finally notice them. So let's have a look at some of those forgotten cards that look like they'll never be imported, in order from most likely to least likely to ever see the light of day in the TCG. First up is Decode Talker Heatsoul. In the OCG, it was released in the Legendary Gold Box, a set responsible for Dragoon, the Topic Draco Future, and other cards that the TCG made us wait ages for, until they finally deigned to release them. In the OCG, Code Talkers are a fairly decent deck, and this card is one of the reasons for that. One of its effects lets you draw a card as a quick effect, meaning that you'll get to do it on your turn and on your opponent's turn as well. This allows them to play a slower, grindier game where they out-resource their opponents with traps, instead of just comboing their way into a max C. So how likely are we to see this? Well, the TCG has been slowly drip feeding us cards from this set over the years, so it's very possible. I also don't think it'll make anywhere near as big as an impact as Dragoon did, so it's a fairly safe import too. As a bonus, Code Talkers are a main characters deck, so all in all, as far as much anticipated cards go, I feel like this one is only a matter of time. Next up is Borrelend Dragon. Coincidentally, it was also released in the Legendary Gold Box, which really makes you think about how different things would be if they had just released that set, instead of chopping it up into a million pieces before scattering them into underwhelming sets just to give anyone a reason to buy them. Oh god, what are they going to put in Hidden Arsenal? Borrelend Dragon is one hell of a card. We all know just how strong Dragon Links can be, largely thanks to the rocket engine, so now imagine them with their boss monster. Being one of the few Link 5 monsters in existence, its effects are well worth it. Before even looking at its main effects, it has decent protection, being indestructible and impossible to target by monster effects, and it has a strong offensive stat line of 3500 attack, especially considering it can attack every single one of your opponent's monsters. But what really pushes it over the top is the fact that it has a quick effect monster negate that your opponent can't respond to, and as a cost, you just need to revive one of your own rocket monsters. So a pure positive. Just what Dragon Links need. As for whether it will be imported, well, Burst of Destiny is giving us a bunch of new rocket support cards like Borrelend Riot Dragon, so it could have made sense to import it there, but from the wording on Konami's website, that seems unlikely. On top of that, the TCG might simply be afraid to give Dragon Links another powerful tool, after already needing to ban LP and limit Striker Dragon. Will we get it? Eventually, yes, I'm sure, especially since it's a rival character's updated boss monster. But we might have to wait until dragons are a bit less powerful, which isn't happening anytime soon. Next up, we have Gigarays Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction. This card has the unfortunate fate of being a Shonen Jump promo, and seeing how some of those turned out, yeah, it might not be great for us. Looking at this card, it's a great fit for a Gren Magi deck. After all, it's a level 8 Dark Monster, and if you've watched my Gren Magi deck profile, you'll know just how valuable that is. Its effect is also good for that deck. Just like Gren Magi, it gains attack based off how many cards are banished, and it can even nuke the field or banish everything, depending on how many Gandoras are in your graveyard, all at the simple cost of half your life points. The bad news? Well, it was a promo all the way back in the 2016 issue of Shonen Jump, meaning it's already been a good 5 years during which they could have imported this card and didn't. At this point, it's anyone's guess as to when they'll decide to actually import it. It's technically a Yugi card, so I'm sure it'll happen one day, but until then, all 2 Gandora players will have to be patient. This next one will be all too familiar for a certain demographic of Yu-Gi-Oh players. We all know that Konami of America loves to censor card art, especially since nowadays they can just reprint them later as lost art promos. But one day, Kazuki Takahashi said no more. Sick of his artwork being redrawn by the titty haters at Konami, when it was time to release Magi Magi Magician Gal in the West, he said that it either needed to be printed uncensored or not at all. The TCG decided to not print it at all. That decision was made all the way back in 2012, and it still stands to this day, with the card still not showing any signs of being imported. Will it ever? Well, this is the first card on the list where the answer is probably no. We all know just how much Konami loves milking dual monster support, so it makes no sense that, if they were able to, they wouldn't have tried milking Dark Magician Girl yet. Oh god, wait, no, not like that. Moving swiftly along, we now come to a rather baffling entry. It's actually the oldest card on this list, meaning it's also the one that's had to wait the longest to be released in English, even if it were to be released tomorrow. Just from that, some of you probably know what I'm talking about, but for the rest of you, it's Shuttleroid. Now, unlike some other cards on this list, it isn't being withheld out of fear of unleashing Tier 1 roids on the format. Not that anyone was worried about that. It's actually a pretty mediocre card, sending itself off to space for a turn when your opponent tries to attack it. To make matters worse, it apparently even stopped showing up in a lot of video games, and was never even reprinted in the ACG. Almost like they're trying to hide something. So why aren't we allowed this card? Well, there's no definitive answer to that, but there are a lot of rumours about it. Some claim that NASA has some copyright beef with Konami in this card, as if they somehow own the very idea of space shuttles, which as far as I know is not true. Others say that it wasn't allowed because it's supposedly too phallic, but I don't buy that for a second when these cards were allowed to be printed. So will this card ever be imported? I'm definitely leaning towards no, since it disappeared in such a mysterious way and for so long. But it's only second on this list, because there's the absolute tiniest chance that it gets imported in the upcoming GX Speed Duel box. I absolutely wouldn't count on it, because clearly Konami has something against this card, but it's still a tiny chance. So now, before we move on to the last card, here's some honourable mentions. Lightbringer Lucifer is worth mentioning since it hasn't been imported and likely never will, but it's for very obvious reasons. Firstly, it's a promotional crossover for a gacha game, and secondly, the character it depicts is called Lucifer, and since the TCG tries to censor any and all religious references, well, they can't really just go and change another company's character name, so instead they'll just never import it. Then there's Neos Kluger. People have wanted Yubel support for absolutely ages, and then this comes along which is kinda Yubel support. Plus it's Neos related, so it has quite a big following, like any hero cards do. I just didn't want to focus on this card because it's yet another card from the Legendary Gold box, and I've talked about that set enough already. Then finally, as the last honourable mention, there's these 2 Altergeist cards, which may not be the longest awaited cards on the list, but me personally, I want to play full power Altergeist, and I've been waiting for about 2 years now, and they've released everything in the set around it, so Konami, I'm really starting to get tired of your Anyway, now for the final card. What card have tons of people waited for over a decade, but that still shows no signs of being released? That would have to go to Holactie, the creator of Light. This card is like the culmination of a dual monster fanboy's dreams. Not only does it work by getting all 3 of the Egyptian gods on the field at the same time, but if you manage to do that and summon it, it awards you with an instant win. It's also an important anime card, being the one to deal the final blow in that arc where they all do a bit of time travel, or just role-playing a D&D campaign, depending on how you look at it. So why would a nostalgia card, and a lore-relevant one at that, not be released in the TCG? Well, for a start, it's already been 10 years since it was released in the ACG, so that should be a pretty big hint that it's not coming. But the real reason is how it was released over there. Instead of just being a normal card in a set, It was released as part of a competition held in Japan. In total, there were only 10,000 winners of that competition, meaning there are exactly 10,000 copies of this card in the whole world. Needless to say, it hasn't been reprinted in the OCG either. Since the TCG isn't likely to ever hold a competition like that, and the OCG likely doesn't want such a limited card to be seen as less special by it being printed as a regular card over here, it likely just means that it will never see the light of day in the TCG. So what did you think? Do you think one of these cards' release is right around the corner? Or is there another unreleased OCG card that you've been awaiting for years? Tell me in the comments below, and while you're there, make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching!